There are many components and classes that support and manage an HTTP request in ASP.NET. However, one of these items ultimately needs to generate some kind of response. That's where HTTP handlers come in. These are the ASP.NET components that implement the iHttp handler interface and are responsible for actually generating a response to an HTTP request. The nature of HTTP handlers requires that only one can execute per request. You might reassign the current handler over the life of a request, but in the end only one will execute. There are generally 4 request lifecycle events that concern HTTP handlers. The first two are map request handler and post map request handler, which fire when ASP.NET asks for a handler for the request and after one has been selected. I've omitted the sibling post events for readability on this chart here. The other 2 events are related to execution. Handlers always execute between the request handler execute and post request handler execute events. This is the point at which a response to the HTTP request is generated. So how do we implement an HTTP handler to begin with? Well, in their most basic form, handlers are actually pretty simple. We just need to create a class that implements the iHttp handler interface and then register it with our application. And this can be done either through code or through a web config entry. Now the iHttp handler interface exposes 2 members, a Boolean property of isReusable and a method called processRequest. IsReusable is just a flag that states whether the handler can be reused across requests. ProcessRequest is the piece that we're really interested in at this point. This is the main execution method of classes that implement iHttp handler, and this is the one that's responsible for generating a response. Note that this method does not specify what type of response should actually be created, so a handler can respond to the request with almost anything: files, JSON, plain text, HTML, and more. MVC generally returns HTML views, but it can return other content as well. In a later lesson, we'll look more closely at the MVC implementation of this. For now, let's implement our own HTTP handler so we can get a general idea of how they work.